How we think about economics matters. Economic decisions have human consequences. They help or hurt people, can strengthen or weaken communities, and can advance or diminish how just a society is. This is the same wherever and whoever we are in the world. However, the extent to which people are affected and how they are affected will be different in each case. What we prioritise and how we arrive at economic decisions is therefore of real importance. The kind of economic decisions we take are often underpinned by our overarching view about what humans are like. Are we purely self-interested, selfish individuals, or do we have the capacity to be more than this? Are we social animals who are intrinsically interconnected with one another, or are we isolated individuals with little binding us together? Moreover, there are considerations about what motivates the kind of economy we have. Should our primary concern be in prioritising growth rates and the maximisation of individual profits at all costs? Or should we place emphasis instead on the dignity and flourishing of the people who live and breathe behind the numbers? Catholic social teaching has its own unique approach to these questions, since it understands economics to be a matter of fundamental human concern. That is to say that there is no such thing as a purely economic view. Whereas some people understand economics to be about the discovery and application of mathematical laws, Catholic social teaching emphasises that economics can never be detached from its direct impact on each human person. 4 key principles spring from this insight and form the basis for Catholic social teaching on economics. Firstly, the universal destination of goods. No one has final ownership over material goods. Ultimately, they derive from and return to their final creator, God. This should encourage a spirit of charity. As the Dominican doctor of the Church, Thomas Aquinas, put it, a person should not treat external things as their own, but as common, so that they are ready to offer them to others in need. Secondly, the preferential option for the poor. When arriving at decisions either in your own life or when thinking about the overarching economics of a society, the perspective and needs of the poor and marginalised should be prioritised. This is a matter of solidarity. Thirdly, the principle of subsidiarity. This is the idea that where individuals and small communities can flourish through their own initiative and efforts, they should do so rather than being guided or directed by a larger or higher authority. The culmination of these principles is the idea of a person-based economy. Economies should be structured around the aim of ensuring that each person can live a dignified and flourishing life. Rather than excessive concern with the pursuit of profits at all costs, the perspective of the common good and the most vulnerable in society should be placed at the heart of economic decision-making. This means that any dehumanising economic relation or activity, or any overly individualistic approach, should be rejected. Since we are still far from achieving the reality of a person-based economy, often the best examples from our Catholic and Dominican tradition concern instances where people have pushed back against existing injustice. For example, they might draw attention to the perspective of the poor in a certain situation, or, with the help of others, try to bring about a fairer economic settlement. One person who embodied the principles of the person-based economy in his life was Father Louis-Joseph Lebret. Born on the French coast in 1897 to a family of sailors, Louis-Joseph joined the Dominican order aged 26. Following priestly ordination, he moved to a different coastal area, San Malo. There, he was horrified by the degrading and dehumanising working and living conditions of the fishermen and their families. Louis-Joseph conducted in-depth surveys and research, asking the fishermen and their families to explain their problems and needs. In response to this, he helped set up trade unions, cooperatives and maritime associations to change how business would be done. As a result, workers gained secure employment and avoided further and future infringements upon their rights. Not only this, but they also achieved a greater stake in how the business was run overall, rather than it being directed by a small number of bosses at the top. The greater realisation that Louis-Joseph came to was that structural evils could not be overcome by individual goodwill alone, but rather by the systematic transformation of those structures. He made two important interventions. The first was to succeed in campaigning for a national reorganisation of sea fisheries in France, changing the way in which they functioned for the workers and their families. The second was to devise a new way of thinking about economics, what he called human economy. In his words, this sought to put the economy back into the service of humanity. The model incorporated many of the features of Catholic social teaching on economics, and Louis Joseph was a key influence on the 1967 papal encyclical Populorum Progressio, which concerned economics and development. Louis Joseph went on to apply his ideas to international development as well. Following a trip to Brazil, he became aware of the scale of economic underdevelopment in the global south. Here too, he conducted surveys and research, asking the most vulnerable what their needs were and using this information to inform decision-making on a wider scale. Louis Joseph was considered a pioneer for this ethical and holistic approach to development, emphasising the different experiences of the poorest and most vulnerable over abstract metrics of economic growth. Louis Joseph's vision combines the preferential option for the poor with the principle of subsidiarity, placing them at the heart of the process of decision-making. More importantly, Louis Joseph advocated that concern for the human person and their ability to flourish should be at the forefront of every single economic decision. Today, Dominican brothers and sisters continue the work of campaigning for an economic system which prioritises the dignity of the human person. They do so in two important ways. Firstly, by using their voice to draw attention to the perspective of the marginalised and the poor. Secondly, by educating those who are being exploited in what their human and workers' rights are. This will empower them to be able to push back where wrongdoing occurs. Here is Sister Margaret Mace speaking about her experience as a young sister working in the Dominican Republic with a group of farmers.
We wanted to be able to give them a voice because they were not accustomed to having anybody ask them their opinion. I remember I asked one fellow once, tell me, what is it that you feel you need? And he said to me, well, you know what I need, you tell me. And I said, I don't know what you need. The only one who knows what you need is you. So, I would say a large part of our work was trying to help people understand that they had rights, that they had a voice, and that at the end of the day, as difficult a battle as it might be, the government was responsible for listening to what they needed.
Today in the Dominican Republic, not a republic run by Dominicans, but named after St. Dominic, massive economic inequalities persist. A small number of powerful national and multinational corporations exercise significant economic and political influence, prioritising profit over people. One such example is Central Romana, a sugar company and the largest private employer in the Dominican Republic. In January 2016, the company forcibly evicted 80 families in the middle of the night without warning, leaving them homeless. The Dominican friars on the ground appealed to the order's permanent presence at the United Nations, who raised awareness of the situation amongst the international community. Dominicans persistently advocated for the families at the UN over a number of years, but there seemed to be little prospect of anything changing. And then, in 2021, there came an astonishing breakthrough, as Father Annett Akuri, the Dominican permanent delegate to the United Nations, explains.
And as luck will have it, as God will have it, late last year, the Washington Post interviewed Lawrence here, the program coordinator, and they published the story. And luckily, again, you heard about the Pandora's Papers.
Yeah.
That company was mentioned. So it kind of triggered the US Congress calling on investigation because the company is US based.
Yeah. Because of the pressure which began with the Dominican friar on the ground, the prospect of justice for those evicted is on the horizon. Not only this, the practices of Central Romana have now been brought under severe scrutiny, not only in terms of their evictions, but also their unethical business models and dehumanising working conditions. In this video, we have explored how Dominicans have tried to advance person-based approaches to economics, both in theory and in practice. There are a number of easy, practical ways in which you can contribute to this effort too. Firstly, it's worth taking some time to research and reflect further on the idea of human-centred economics. For example, a book like Anthony Annett's Cathonomics, How Catholic Tradition Can Create a More Just Economy, provides an account of how Catholic social teaching can be applied to economics today. Or, if you wanted to go into even more depth, you could explore the Las Casas Institute book series, Economics as a Moral Science. After thinking more deeply about what a person-based economy would look like, you could then take steps to actively support the economic policies, campaigns and organisations which put people, especially the poorest, first. Moreover, as a consumer, you could try to prioritise using companies which comply with good practice, including using sites like www.goodonyou.eco, which rank companies based on their ethical credentials. Whilst these might seem like relatively small acts, changing our own attitude to economics and campaigning for this change with others represents an important first step. As Pope Francis reminds us, the grave economic challenges facing today's world require courageous changes of attitude that will restore the end, the human person, and the means, economics, to their proper place. This change of attitude, which prioritises person rather than profit, starts with us, with people like you and me.